So not even a year after the release of the highly anticipated Resident Evil 2 remake, people had already kind of moved on and wondered when Resident Evil 3 Nemesis would, or even if it would, get the same treatment. Well, sure enough, we ended up getting a trailer for it, and that was just one wild time, I can tell you that. Now, despite the minor nags I had with RE2, to have a game that was so polished, the detail, the gameplay behind it, the goringly beautiful graphics behind it, it was outstanding to see. And in all intents and purposes, it didn't really take too long after RE7 to have something this well made come out. So it would be kind of interesting to see how the devs could handle a yearly release slated like this. So that was something people were keeping an eye out for. So let's do just that. We won't waste any time here. Let's dive right in and take a look at Resident Evil 3 Nemesis Remake. Well, I guess it would be Resident Evil 3 Remake, but the original game was Nemesis. But it's missing the Nemesis title, but it's not the remake on the title. 2 didn't have the remake on the title either, now that I come to think about it, but it's still the remake, but it does have Nemesis, but that was a really important key point to the title, and I'm not quite sure where to keep going with this whole thing, so I think I might just end it right here. So, Resident Evil 3 Remake stars a returning Jill Valentine, on the verge of escaping Raccoon City. She's been stewing over trying to find ways to take down Umbrella after the mansion incident, but has been having issues going through with it since she lacks a lot of evidence and most of the STARS members involved aren't around to assist her. The stress is getting to her as she's been having nightmares of turning into a zombie, but she perseveres. That is until the zombie infestation of Raccoon City spreads citywide, sending the place into mass panic. Jill's debate on whether to leave right away or not looms over her some more since she feels like Umbrella might send people to eliminate her. That is, until those fears come to fruition when Brad Vickers calls her, urging her to escape. She's confused as to why until...
Alright, let me grab my...
Meet Nemesis, a biological tyrant weapon programmed to hunt down STARS members, and it has its sights set on Jill. So, now, Jill must find a way to escape the city with a lot of help from a commando soldier named Carlos and his crew, all the while evading the looming presence hunting her down. So much like how I felt with 2, 3 story isn't anything too crazy. If anything, it's more kind of like a side story or meanwhile type of situation within the mythos of RE2 and RE3. But one thing that kind of bugged me when I first heard about the game was that a lot of stuff was going to get explained in RE3 that happened in RE2. Like, everything was blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't really down for that. Winks and nods are fine in a video game to other pieces of its same source material, but I want a game to have its own story and have something to explain on its own, not be dedicated to explain another form of media, because then what's the point? It should have been in there, I guess. I don't know. I'm weird with it, but thankfully it's not really like that. There are some references, but RE3 itself has a decent story, and on top of that, it has some decent characters too. Jill is a snarky badass who tackles her challenges head on, and Carlos is just an awesome dude. He's suave without being douchey, and he comes through in a pinch on multiple occasions. Outside of them, there are a few more characters that also aren't too bad, despite limited screen time. Mikhail kind of gives me some of that like sassy grandpa feels, and Nikolai is given more clarification behind being his villainous self compared to the original, even if it is still a little dumb. The only character I really didn't like was Brad, mostly because he didn't really go out in any cool fashion, so he wasn't even good fodder, so stupid Brad. As for the quality of the game, there isn't much to say different from RE2 Remake. It looks amazing, and even the lip sync nags I had with 2 and Devil May Cry 5 almost feels non-existent. This is the best lip syncing I've seen in any video game that I can immediately recall. The only thing I find a little funny is Carlos's mop head looks a little funky at times, but otherwise, everything looks great, disgusting or otherwise. And the gameplay as well doesn't need too much to explain when it comes to basic gameplay. Like 2 and 7, you run and shoot and you take key items to places to progress further in the game. It's all the same. To talk about the more noticeable things though, to start, there's only one campaign to play through, playing between mostly Jill and 2 little stints as Carlos. Jill starts out the game as you'd expect equipment-wise, slow progressing, small inventory space to which you'd upgrade all throughout. When you play as Carlos, he starts out rocking an assault rifle and pistol and lots of room to spare. That doesn't entirely mean that you should treat a sequence as a run and gun, root and tootin' gameplay, but it is a bit more liberal than you'd probably be used to. Adding to their arsenal, they both got knives and... They aren't very good. They're like slapping with butter knives. I'm glad they're infinite use though, so that at least you can bust open boxes or check for fake out zombies without damaging them. But I do still miss how knives worked in 4 or even 7. Sure, 7 takes a long time to kill enemies too, but zombies are too quick to automatically grab you from almost any direction and do damage, and also still takes too much time to kill. That's not the only tool at their disposal, as Jill and Carlos both have evasive maneuvers. With good timing, either Jill can dodge roll out of the way of an enemy's attack and have like a bullet time moment to do some damage, or Carlos can shoulder tackle comboed into a knockdown haymaker. These things are great ways to open up situations to deal with enemies, though the timing can be a little finicky sometimes. In Jill's case though, using it in a boss fight, succeeding or not, is still pretty helpful, since if you press the dodge button, Jill still leaps ahead a good distance anyways. She just gets stuck in a small little stunlock animation if she unsuccessfully dodges. That being said, the game's structure feels very different from 2, hovering more around how it felt like in 4. That being, the game feels way more linear than 2. The early part in the streets of Raccoon City being a slight exception, but even then, you have a spot to go to and you can't really deviate much till you do that stuff first, and even then, anything extra isn't too much. And there's also a huge lack of overall puzzles throughout the game. There were like 2 mandatory ones that I remembered, with only like a few saves kicking around that don't really count as puzzles, since all you have to do is find the code and then you're in. Rather, the most noticeable thing with the gameplay is the big bad nemesis. He shows up really early on to cause you problems, and he will not be stopped until he eventually does, then gives himself a pep talk and goes after you some more. Much like Mr. X, he stalks you all throughout the streets of Raccoon City, increasing in lethality as he keeps upping his arsenal all throughout. The difference between the 2 monsters, though, is that I think Nemesis is way better implemented. The streets are way more open, allowing more opportunity to keep out of Nemesis' attack, even though the dude is super quick. Thanks to sidestepping though, his speed can be negated with proper timing. As well, when he starts to chase after you, it's a very clear shift in momentum. Rather than being in a conventional puzzle solver mode, the real puzzle to solve now is to figure out the best method of eluding Nemesis, with lots of room to accomplish that goal. The claustrophobic nature of 2 really annoyed me with Mr. X, because if you ran into him along your direct path to wherever you were going, you were pretty much going to either use up ammo, use up health, or be forced to go a different route, taking much longer time to get to where you needed to go, unless you knew how to manipulate the AI. But thanks to Nemesis' speed, you can't really manipulate his AI, so it really is a matter of learning to duck and weave through cover and to take the path of least resistance as best as you can, all the while still making progress to your goal. Nemesis also acts as basically your sole boss all throughout. A close second, I would say, are the returning hunters, which can kill you in one strike, which is annoying, but still manageable with some grenades. On a sort of side note, I had a weird glitch happen when I was doing some of the boss fights against Nemesis. Every time I aimed to shoot, that zoomed in perspective would remain when I stopped aiming, with it zooming in further still each time I did. The only way to fix it was to basically stop moving for a moment. I managed the fights, mostly because I just kind of kept running, though it did get a little annoying. So, all in all, I kind of liked my time more with RE3 than I did with RE2. The visuals are basically the same, but there's a better flow with the gameplay without sacrificing its actual survival horror element to it. Jill and Carlos are really interesting characters, and although there is a bit of lacking in the puzzle department, Nemesis I find to be the way better implemented Terminator-like character. So, what could I possibly find wrong with this game? Oh, a little under 4.5 hours to complete it. Woof. Granted, while 2 did have multiple scenarios and characters, I felt like there wasn't too much different between them to really make them unique. But at the end of the day, there were differences, as well as more time consuming all throughout. Here though, one sitting, 4 hours, oof, it's not very good. To be fair, I guess, most Resident Evils somewhat incentivize multiple playthroughs, encouraging players to race through the game. It's even in the achievement/trophy list. So I still think that some people will get their money's worth. To the average consumer though, 4.5 hours for one playthrough is just too short. And I feel it's what's causing the internet to lose their minds over the game the most. I've seen stuff like, wow, Nemesis is so annoying, he only chases Jill, what a perv, and the gameplay is so bad, blah blah blah. Well, Mr. X was much of the same. I thought he was way more annoying thanks to the tight corridors. He chased you no matter what, he just had a tendency to haymaker you more, and the game in general is pretty much the same. So I don't see why we're nitpicking now on these relatively minor things just because now we got a game that was slightly shorter to the average player. It is a shame that there was content missing from the original. I feel like if that content was in this game, it probably have upped the time a fair bit, but I don't know the politics behind the cut content, so I can't commentate too much on that. And to that end, that's why I feel like they bundled that side game Resistance in with Resident Evil 3, just to try to give us our money's worth. For what I've seen though on Resistance, it just really makes me want Valve to hurry up and make Left 4 Dead 3. All I can say though at the end of the day is that if this game was 30, maybe even $20 cheaper, then I think people would have a much better outlook on this whole experience. And I think that's something I would encourage at the end of the day, is that this is a must-own game. It is fantastic. Just don't get it at full price. It's not wholly worth the experience, but if you can get it a little bit cheaper, then it's easily money's worth. And I guess that's all I can say about it. And it's a shame, I guess. But at least while we're here, we can hear Jill say that most iconic line. Oh, I'm excited for this one.
Come on! Next time, take the fucking hit!
She doesn't say the line. No, stars, I'll give you stars. She doesn't do it. Oh god, 0 out of 10, worst game ever. But anywho, thank you all so much for watching. If you like what you saw, you can click right up here to check out some of my other videos that I've done, or if you really feel like it, you can click right up here to subscribe. And until next time guys, I will see you all later.